Okay, everybody. Well, hello. We're at a point here where we're moving on to session 2 in business organization. So that's what we have up here on the board. Don't forget, I do have a private email up here, robdawalt@me.com. You can do in addition to the information that you find in the syllabus. We'll talk about session 2, which is kind of a moving forward a little bit, but we also want to review a few comments and statements that we made in session 1. So remember, one of the first things we talked about in session 1 was the issue of the sole proprietorship. And remember that sole proprietorship, it's run by one person, and so basically the government still recognizes that there's a lot of these small businesses out there that are run by one guy, and we noticed that when we were looking at those statistics that there's just a huge number in relation to everything else. It's like 80-10, and then all the rest of the different relationships are in that other 10%. So 10% giant corporations, 80% single owner, small proprietorship. So one of the things to understand is there's kind of a sense of need to guard the right to do that in this country. Here again, it's what sets us apart from a lot of different people. So the idea that a sole proprietor has to file a lot of paperwork, it's kind of not seen as a good thing in this country. And as we've had an intrusion of things like workers' compensation, Social Security, now health care, and taxation, and having to withhold taxes for people and stuff. A lot of these sole proprietors are being burdened down by the need to keep a lot of records, a lot of written paperwork, and so forth. So this is very time consuming, cuts into the ability to achieve what your goal is, make your widget or sell your widget or whatever you're trying to do. And so that's why it's not very well favored in our society. But one thing we do know in the law is that sole proprietors do not have to file a fictitious business name statement with the Secretary of State. In other words, a lot of this they can run on the back of a matchbox if they want. And so there's not going to be a lot of state intrusions. The closer that you get to the individual, the more that people are responsive to the needs of the individual. So local government more so than state government more so than federal government. So there's a lot of federal intrusion into our lives nowadays that we never had back, let's say, before the Civil War, or even in the 20th century in relation to the 21st century, or the 19th century in relation to the 20th century. So as time goes on, life becomes more complex. There are more requirements, and so many of these require a written response. But it is false that the sole proprietor would have to file a fictitious business name statement with the state. Also, sole proprietorships can only be formed with permission of the state is also false. In other words, a guy can go out, start selling watermelons out of the back of his truck, and nobody can really stop him from doing that. Some of your cities are passing rules and regulations that are putting harsh penalties on merchants that want to go and sell like door to door. But quite frankly, there's also litigation out there, 14th Amendment type litigation, that goes into the right of people, free assembly. That you can solicit other people without any kind of license. So let's say for example you're a Bible salesman and you want to go like house to house and sell Bibles in a small town in Indiana. Or basically anywhere. I wonder what the law is on that. Well, why don't we have you guys work on that question, and you can submit an extra credit assignment on what is the law on basically door-to-door salesmen. Do they have to have a license to sell door-to-door? Tell me what you find out on it. If you find a case on it, brief it. If you just find a treatise or something in LexisNexis, let me know, like Amjur or ALR or anything like that that you can find. Even a law review article. What are the rights of people to sell? Like the Fuller Brush Man used to be when I was a kid. They'd come knocking on the door and want to sell my mother a new hairbrush, and then maybe some cleaning supplies to, like brush off all the dust around the house and things like that. Now today, a lot of cities are trying to claim that they can require a license for people to go door to door. But there's other people that say that's an infringement on the right of freedom of assembly under the First Amendment through the 14th Amendment, due process, equal protection. In other words, they have the right to go and solicit people. Would you like to buy a Bible, for example? So you get into that, religion, these type of things, then you get into this solicitation and stuff, and people don't like to be bothered, especially like just sitting down to dinner, somebody comes a knocking, Modern example is these phone calls that you get, could you donate to March of Dimes, right at dinner time, and there are rules against that, the do not call lists that are coming out. But the question is the solicitation at home by a door-to-door salesman, is that still legal or not? So try to investigate that and let me know. Well, getting back to some of this presentation that we've been making then, a lot of people say that there is a requirement, and many states agree with this, that agreements must be in writing to be enforceable. And in fact, there is a thing called a statute of Statute of Fraud, okay, about lost it there. And if it's sales over $500 or anything involving real estate is required to be in writing. So, you're buying a car, has to be in writing. You want to sell your house, has to be in writing. So you have to have a written agreement of sale, conditions, and then of course a written deed in order for this to be binding. So these are the kind of things that we look at. Well, there is also another concept called the Equal Dignities Rule, and what that relates to is the principle, basically, authority to engage in a transaction. So in other words, if you have a real estate agent, then there has to be some kind of apparent authority of that person to sell that property for you. Whether it's a car, whatever it is, there has to be an attached statement that goes with it that, this is my agent's authority, this is my agent, I've given him authority to sell these 40 acres, here's his basically paperwork that says that I did give him that right. Sometimes we use what we call a power of attorney, which can be used for a number of different things, where you give somebody authority through a power of attorney, okay? And a lot of times people don't even know how to use the signature process in a power of attorney. And so that's one thing that is statutory that bears some looking into. Indiana has a separate statute. You actually can refer to the power of attorney as attorney in fact. And so basically, this is a consideration here about these written agreements again. Well, when a manager of a retail shop asks an assistant to order new merchandise, the assistant is acting. So in other words, when a manager says to an agent an employee, let's say, of this little shop, let's say it's a sole proprietorship, and he says, clerk, call up and order more merchandise. And so this would be a sub-agency. The actual agent is the owner, manager, agent manager. So whoever's in charge is the actual agent of the company, but the employee of the agent would be what we call a sub-agent, okay? Now, another issue is what is the fiduciary? When we say fiduciary duty, what's the fiduciary duty of a real estate agent? And so real estate agent, this has been really a problematic area. Realtors, they say they have a strong ethical standard, but I've often doubted that, because a lot of times it seems like a real estate agent is trying to play both sides of the street. They make more money if they represent both the buyer and the seller of real estate, for example. I've had a lot of bad experiences with real estate agents where I felt like they were really unethical, even though they try to claim that they are ethical. Because there's a lack of good faith, there's a lack of candor, there's a lack of fair dealing. So basically what you're looking at is they have to have good faith, they have to have candor, and they have to engage in fair dealing. So this has got to be fair to all parties involved. You can't cheat anybody, you can't lie to them about the roof is brand new when the roof is like 30 years old and leaking. Anything that you know as a real estate agent, you've got to share. Like if you're representing the buyer needs the best information about, what is the status of this property. Is it good? Has it got problems? Or some of these problems need to be fixed? Or do you just want to make a sale and put that 3% in your pocket? Or whatever that percentage is. Sometimes it's even higher. Manager of a retail shop orders new merchandise. Although the owner of the store has not expressly instructed the manager to do that, the act is considered to be authorized under the principles of implied agency. So here again, there may not be that document that we talked about earlier where you have to prove your authority. So here we have what we call the apparent authority, and so it is a form of implied agency. There are also numerous formalities that are involved in forming a sole proprietorship. What's the answer to that question? No. The answer is no, that's not true. You can just walk out, start selling watermelons off the back of your truck if you want to, and that's your business, and you are a sole proprietor of your business. And say you want to get some teenagers involved because you can't sit out there for 12 hours a day. So you get some kids out there with a cigar box and they sell your watermelons for you. Well, that's okay, it's perfectly legal. That's a sole proprietorship, okay? I've seen that a lot. Like my uncle, he started a lawn mowing business late in his life. In fact, it's kind of funny. He retired from being involved as a bulk plant manager, and he went around and delivered heating oil to people's houses for his whole life. And that's hard work. I mean, especially in the dead of winter, you're having to hook that hose up and pump in the heating oil. Well, when he got retired, he was way up in his 70s. Well, he started a little business going around mowing his friends' yards because they couldn't find anybody reliable to mow their lawn. And so he hired all of his grandkids and was going around making all the arrangements to line up the lawn mowing, and then he'd drop the kids off with a mower and have them mow the people's lawn, and then he'd come back and pick them up later. So it was his job to kind of manage this. He wasn't doing any mowing per se, but he was lining up something for his grandkids to do in the summer to make a little money. And I thought that was a really neat idea because I don't think he even cared about making any money for himself, but he was wanting to try to help. And all the parents had to work, so they couldn't get involved in really trying to help these kids find a job. And so what he was doing is meeting a need, because he had a lot of his friends complaining, we can't find anybody to do our mowing. And he had one of his granddaughters out there mowing his lawn one day, and he had this bright idea. He's like, so basically what you have is a little sole proprietorship where you're just hiring all your grandkids and you're taking them out and letting them mow people's lawn. And then basically, you're not doing it for a lot of profit or anything, but mainly you're just trying to help your kids, help their kids to make a little money, a little spending money out there. Okay, so under the duty of loyalty, a real estate agency may not represent the seller and the buyer at the same time unless he discloses it. So he's got a duty of disclosure to the buyer and the seller. Now, what I don't like about that is that he convinces them Well, that'll not be a problem. And I just really, I don't buy it. All too often, I just see too many problems with that real estate agent. He's really being self-serving, first of all, because all he wants is a commission, and then in turn, he really owes duties to one party or the other, more so than the other, so somebody's going to get burned in any kind of a three-way deal like that. And so the real estate agent has a duty to disclose that he's representing both the buyer and the seller, but I don't think it's that effective. It's a matter of loyalty, it's a duty of loyalty, and I just don't think you can be loyal to both parties. It'd be like a lawyer trying to do a divorce for both the man and the woman. I've heard about it, but it always causes problems. It's unethical. Lawyers will be suspended for that if they do that, so it shouldn't be done that way. Realtors ought to be the same way. You got to pick a side. You can't be on both sides at the same time, but yet they've got these relaxed laws and rules. I don't think it's fair that they're held to such a low standard. Sole proprietorship does not need a license to conduct business. Well, this is not necessarily true. This is all subject to different kinds of local regulation. Let's say you want to be a medical doctor and you're a sole proprietorship. Do you need a license? Well, yes, you do. You want to be an accountant? Well, yeah. Should you be a CPA? Yes. How about a lawyer? Well, yeah, you got to have a license. So there's licensing on a number of different things. Let's say that you are a veterinarian. I mean, you can just go on and on. More and more, it becomes more and more complex. Plumbers, they need to be, they need to know their stuff. So a lot of places, they require a license that you actually have met all these required standards. Okay. Sole proprietors generally retain all business profits and suffer all losses by themselves. That is a true statement, and that's why a lot of times people want to go into partnerships, because they are in a situation where they don't like taking that much risk. It's kind of uncomfortable to have to share the proceeds of some kind of a major sale or something. But in the long and short of it, over time, you want to ride the roller coaster, or would you like to smooth things out, have smooth sailing, so that you can make sure that you're at least going to have something coming in, because both sides are sharing in the responsibility to run the business and generate profits. So that's the advantage of a partnership over a sole proprietorship. Okay, well, basically those are the big things I wanted to cover for session 2 in business organizations. I hope that you learned something, had some use of this. If you need to look this over more than once, always remember you can look at these multiple times. I've even had people download these onto like an MP3 player or an iPad or something like that and watch them over and over again. I said this in another class. I had a lady tell me that she watched one of my lectures 32 times. I don't know what that was all about. Maybe she just liked me. But regardless, you can do this again and again if it takes you a while to grasp some of these different concepts. Well, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. We'll be back later with something else. Thank you.